Hi, this is Kim Hallen with Unbridled, and welcome to episode 4 of Tempo's Journey of Emotional Healing. I want to kick off this episode with a question that has weighed heavily on me for a lot of Tempo's life, and that is the question of how much of her behavior is her innate personality and how much of her behavior is a result of her life experiences and or learned behaviors. And, we could debate that all day long, and I have spent a lot of time doing that, and many people have talked with me about all the various possibilities related to that, and we could go down those rat holes all day long. But at the end of the day, what's important to know is that every living being is a combination of our innate personality and the experiences that we've had in our lives, good and bad. And when those two things come together, our innate personality and our experiences, what results is, how we cope with it, how our innate personality is able to cope with the life experiences that we have. And that experience is unique to every individual, and no two people experience life in the same way. And so, if nothing else, what this journey with Tempo has taught me is how important it is to always acknowledge and honor the person or the horse or the other animal that's before us, whatever individual it is, to honor and acknowledge who they are and to meet them where they are. And, today in my business, I work with a lot of horses that have behavioral issues. And sometimes I know things about their past, or their owner knows things about their past, or they think they know. There's always a lot of guessing, a lot of speculation, a lot of assumptions that are made about why a horse is the way that it is. And we love to blame other people for causing these issues in our horses' pasts. I don't have that luxury with Tempo because she's been with me from the beginning. And that is part of the reason I think I've been able to get to this place, is because Tempo's journey has showed me that even a horse that is loved dearly all its life and is in the hands of a somewhat knowledgeable and capable trainer can still end up with a lot of issues. And that's been humbling. And it really causes me to not cast blame on necessarily. Sometimes we know horses have come from really traumatic experiences, and that's a fact. But other times, really extreme behavior can result from horses that really have not been in any way intentionally mistreated. So I no longer make those assumptions, and I've discovered that it really doesn't matter what we know about a horse's past or a person's past. If we meet that individual where they are and just honor and accept it and think about how do we move forward and how do we heal together, that's what's important. And the other interesting thing that has been a big lesson is that I've had to learn how to move out of this idea that as a trainer and an owner, it's my responsibility to fix whatever is wrong or broken in a horse. We can't ever fix somebody else. Now, we can obviously modify their behavior, we can train them, we can manipulate them, we can do lots of things that might make it easier to live in interaction with them, but we can't fix what we think is broken in somebody else. All we can do is set up a situation that supports and allows them to do that difficult work of healing and personal transformation on their own. That is a huge switch, and especially in the horse industry where we're all about getting better as trainers and getting better at getting our horses to be who we want and do what we want and perform the way we want and behave the way we want. It's really, really easy to forget that the horse is actually a sentient being that is having its own experience in all of this, and that it has its own journey that it's on. The horse does, just like we do. And we need to be, if we really want to connect with our horses and have the relationship that we all dream of having with our horses, we have to realize it may not look the way we think it's going to look, and that you can't have a truly harmonious relationship with any individual if it's all on one person's agenda, if it's all being perceived out of one person's lens and perspective. So that's the real journey here, and we're going to get into a lot of technical details and how-tos, but I wanted to share that up front, those two really big lessons for me in this journey. So with that, let's get started. As I was going back through old video footage, looking for clips to use in this series, I came across some footage from when Tempo was weaned. It's actually footage of when we returned Tempo to, and her mother, we reunited Tempo and her mother after Tempo was weaned. And this video footage provides some really interesting insight into Tempo's innate nature, and specifically her difficulty in situations where she doesn't have control over what's happening. And I had said at the end of episode 3 that I knew in my heart that Tempo was not an aggressive horse by nature, and that is absolutely true. But what I hadn't yet fully acknowledged or recognized is that Tempo is by nature a bit of a control freak. So let me share this footage with you. It's not at all uncommon for a young horse to try to nurse again when it's first reintroduced to its mother, and to be a little bit frustrated when the mother says no. But most foals will take that no and just kind of move on, because by then they've already learned how to live without nursing and with other horses. But as you can see here, Tempo was basically, it looks like she's harassing her mother. And people who saw this behavior often, wanted to label her as really dominant and aggressive, and Puck as being, too submissive as an inexperienced mother, and that she didn't discipline Tempo enough. All kinds of things like that. When I watch this footage now, I can see that this is not dominance behavior, and it's not even really aggression. This is frustration. You can see her there. She wants to try to nurse, and then when she can't, she is frustrated. She's not trying to hurt Puck. She's not even trying to tell Puck to do anything in particular. She is just so frustrated. She doesn't know what to do with herself. It's causing her to bite. It's causing her to, act out. In fact, my ex-husband used to call these episodes tempo tantrums, because it was a lot like a 2-year-old who wasn't getting its way and, just having a tantrum. But interestingly, if you watch this behavior, you can see a lot of similarities to how she behaved with me later. So here, she got frustrated enough, then she went over to try to seek some comfort from Shoki, and her relationship with Shoki was really good, and you can see that calms her down. He is a calming presence for her because their relationship was really stable. And then here's some more footage of her frustration. You can see Puck did not have any trouble telling her no, but look at Tempo. Instead of taking that no, it made her angrier. It made her more frustrated. And this is why dominance didn't work for her with me either, or with anybody else, because Tempo didn't really take no for an answer. She didn't know how to just say, okay, this is my new reality, and let me deal with it. She was pretty obsessed, and would just get herself more and more worked up. And, it's a kind of a sad way to be. But if if you've known anyone, or if you are someone who has any kind of, obsessive thoughts or high level anxiety, you know how hard it is to turn that thought off. You see her here again. Now, luckily, she's too big and she cannot reach under there to nurse appropriately. We actually had to, we weaned her once and she was separated for 2 months. And then when I put her back, she was still small enough that she could reach into nurse, and she wore Puck down. And Puck finally said, hey, have at it. And she started producing milk again. And so we had to separate Tempo a second time for another good month, at least, before we tried this again. And thankfully, Tempo was too big to be able to nurse. And so even if if Puck, her dam, had, decided, I'm just tired of dealing with this child, she can nurse, Tempo couldn't. So we were in luck in that regard. But it took quite a while for Tempo to stop trying. She just couldn't accept this new reality. And this is something that's true about Tempo to this day. If something that she has come to know and trust and that is familiar, like her relationship with her mother was as a youngster, and nursing was part of that, and then you change that dynamic, and she wants it to be the way that it used to be, but it can't be, and she cannot accept that very easily. And she obviously, as you can see here, didn't have any natural coping skills to help her with that. And, Puck had to be more dominant than she wanted to be with her. This clip, again, I just wanted to show that, she's had a very peaceful relationship with Shoki. It's not that Tempo doesn't know how to behave around adult horses. She was very respectful of Shoki. And to this day, she is not dominant over her mom. Okay, so here, the very first signs of frustrated, displaced behavior in Tempo. She was not playing with this chair here. She is so frustrated that she can't control what's happening with her mom that she starts looking for other avenues to take out that frustration. So there were early signs that this was her personality to begin with. And here I wanted to show you, this is like days later, we're still working on the weaning process, or reintroducing them, and Tempo is still really upset. And I wanted to show you this head tossing behavior because a lot of horses exhibit this, and it's misinterpreted in many situations. So here you can see she's not aggressive toward me. I'm holding the camera there, even when I ask her to move away. At this point in her life, she was not frustrated with me. She was frustrated with her mother and that this relationship had changed. But that head tossing is a sign of frustration, and typically horses do this, whether they're males, females, they do this when they cannot control what's happening, and it's a sign of frustration. And there she tries for a moment to calm herself with grazing, but she can't let it go. Again, this horse innately does not have much ability to comfort herself, find her way back to acceptance and peace. She wants to be able to change this situation, and she can't let go of that thought. And I know there's a lot of people who can relate to that feeling, and all of us have felt like that at times in our lives. So this went on for a couple weeks after we reintroduced the herd, before Tempo finally started to settle in. And she still to this day will get frustrated with her mom when her mom doesn't want to behave in the way that Tempo feels like a mom should behave. So really interesting footage. And I'm glad I found it so I could include it. So now let's fast forward to 4 years later, after all of the drama with her bone cyst and the rehabilitation, and the 2 years after that when I struggled to just manage her behavior and to try to continue her training, because I really believed I needed to fix all of this that was broken in her. And at the end of episode 3, I told you that I finally found Dolores, Arste, and Zen Horsemanship and Constructional Approach Training for Horses, also known as CAT-H. And the underlying premise behind CAT-H is that we reward for calm. This also means that basically from the horse's perspective, calm is going to get them what they want. To give you an example of what this looks like, I wanted to show this video footage from feeding time with the horses, because after Tempo was reintroduced to the herd after being in the stall, feeding time was a time when she would get extremely worked up. And this video footage is actually after we'd been working on this for quite a while. And so at this stage, Tempo was pacing mildly at the gate, but nothing like the behavior she used to exhibit at feeding time. And you'll see, you can just see my shoulder start to come into the frame there. The idea is that I will come forward with the feed when Tempo stops moving her feet. Now, that may not be relaxation yet, but it is a step in the right direction, and it is what's going to keep me safe with her. So anytime she stops her feet, I start moving. If she moves her feet, I stop. Okay, so she's moving her feet, I'm stopped. She stops her feet, I move. She moves her feet, I stop. Now here she can reach me. The other thing that I trained her was to back up in order for me to come in. That was the cue. She had to back up in order for me to come in with the food. And that was another way to keep me safe, because she used to be on top of me when I would come in with the food. And here I'm just feeding them some bagged hay, I think, just for this example. But you can see she's still a little bit agitated. She can't stay at one bowl. She wants to go to another. But really, she's quite calm. So we've been working on this for quite a while. This is the only footage I could find of this. But I did at least want to show you the example. And this is an exercise that would be useful for a lot of people with their horses. A lot of horses get very anxious at feeding time. And by teaching them this, you give them some, at least, illusion that they're kind of in control of things. They know that if they stop moving their feet or pacing or biting or weaving or whatever it is your horse does, that will cause you to give them what they want, which is to come forward with the feed. They will pretty quickly learn to work at keeping themselves still or quiet. So that was a good example of what it looks like to use positive reinforcement to reward a horse for movement toward calmness. But what if what the horse wants and needs is actually distance from something that is aversive to them? So in Tempo's case, after all of she had been through in the stall, I had actually become an aversive to her. I represented a threat to her control over what was happening to her and her body. So when it comes to a horse that is fearful or aggressive, the first step is establishing a baseline in relation to whatever is causing the stressed out and aggressive behavior in the horse. Now, I want to take a moment here to acknowledge that for me, coming to terms with the fact that I was an aversive to this horse that I had loved and raised from birth and always tried my best to do my best by her, this was a very emotional and difficult mental transition for me. So I'm going to move into the actual process, but I just wanted to acknowledge that emotionally was a difficult thing for me to accept. Once I did accept that what Tempo really wanted was distance from me and the pressure that my presence put on her, the next step was to start very far back, far away from her. And I'm zooming in with the camera here, but I was actually quite a ways away from the horses. And I had put them in this dirt area so that I could really pay attention to her responses. And you saw that it took a few minutes, but I'm way back in the distance. And you notice I like that she's with Shoki here, because you can see Shoki's not paying any attention to me. My presence isn't concerning him at all. But Tempo is sort of obsessively looking at me. You can just almost feel in her energy is what is she going to do? What's happening here? And her body language is tense. And again, you can compare her body language and movement with Shoki's here. And so this was just confirming for me that even when I am quite a great distance away from Tempo at that point, I was still causing her distress. And here she moved around and was trying to find something to graze on. As I've talked about earlier, that's an attempt to calm herself. And there I think her agitated energy actually affected Puck momentarily. So I zoomed out again so you could really see I'm pretty far away from the horses. And Tempo is, trying to making efforts to calm herself here. There's really nothing for her to graze right there. She's, in fact, might even be licking the dirt. That's something she used to do sometimes when she was feeling anxious. And so the first step of this was for me to just go really far away and start approaching her until she responded in some way. So I would start where she was at a place of relaxation, or as close to relaxation as I could get with her. I honestly think she was on alert as soon as I came outside. Here's again a little displaced behavior. It seems low level. She's thinking about playing with that. She lets out a little snort there, which is good. A release of a little bit of energy and tension maybe, but she's really looking at me. Then that's displaced behavior on the post. So if I hadn't gotten really quiet and observed her from a great distance, I could have assumed that this is just a relaxed horse moving around a little. But I learned to start watching. And again, look how different her behavior is from Shoki's. The head shaking, and then watch her mouth here. Watch how much action I get out of her mouth. Just from being, I was probably over 100, 125, 150 yards away from her at this point. And this kind of mouth behavior, it's really hard to say exactly what it is, but it can be a sign that the horse is trying to either release or cope with tension, make a mental transition to realizing maybe she's okay. Again, I can't tell you exactly what it means, but it is certainly related to stress and a stress response. And I think it is a sign that the horse is trying to come down off of stress a little bit. But anyway, wanted you to see that kind of behavior. And again, she just can't really quite be still and relax. She's looking for ways to comfort herself. So I had to acknowledge that even from a very great distance, my presence was stressful for Tempo. And again, that was a hard thing to acknowledge, but once you can get out of the emotional state of it, I started to become really fascinated with it. Again, I'm showing the other two horses just to say they really aren't, paying any attention to me. My presence hasn't disrupted them at all, but Tempo is kind of stewing about it a little bit here. And the most important thing to note is that even without direct human contact or interaction, Tempo still exhibited stress response in relation to humans entering her environment, even from a distance. Once I began to see Tempo's behaviors with new eyes, I went into a period of observation and data gathering. And so in this situation, I'm actually inside the paddock with them, and this is a higher level of anxiety from Tempo. A lot of people would think, again, this is her being bored or playing with the barrel, but it is not. She would never do this behavior when we were in the house. I never saw it. I used to watch the horses out the window all the time. But if I would come and sit in the paddock with her, with the horses, she would often go to the barrel and start this obsessive licking. And you can see Puck's there, maybe offering her some comfort and moral support, or maybe just checking to see, is there something worth licking there? But you can see Tempo too. She's looking at me in between licking this barrel and nosing this barrel. This is, pretty, actually a pretty high level of anxiety and anxious behavior. Now, this clip is another one where she had actually come over to me, but I wanted you to notice how flared her nostrils are and how tense her jaw is. Actually, she was actually gritting her teeth here, which I could hear in person, but you couldn't hear on the video, even with the sound up. But, the other horses are kind of, just moving around doing their thing, and Tempo is just standing over me pretty stressed. And then she goes back to the barrel. So I guess in between there I had moved closer to the barrel. I'm not sure. I think there was a split in the clip there. But she went right back to this obsessive licking. And I think there I tried to just break it up to see what would happen if I just interrupted the behavior gently. And, she took a step over, but she went right back to wanting to lick the barrel. And again, her mouth and jaw are pretty tense. The nostrils are flaring a little bit. Her eye might look soft. Actually, her eye, now that I know, looks a little checked out. And she's just kind of, actually she's showing a lot of self-control here. She's not being aggressive, which was wonderful. But you see one nostril's a little higher than the other. That's another classic sign of some tension, just showing you what the other horses are doing. Meanwhile, Tempo's kind of frozen here, maybe a little bit not sure what to do since I asked her to move off of the barrel, and trying to figure out if she can just, cope with being here with me. Not a lot of blinking happening, which is another sign that a horse is a little bit high on the emotional scale. The furrowed eyebrows. So, you'll get used to, as you practice, you'll get used to identifying facial expressions that are worried or anxious. So then I went further away and restarted this, and you can see she went right back to the barrel and started the obsessive licking again, and a little bit of tail swishing too. So again, just wanted you to see this behavior and realize that this is stress behavior. It's not play. As you will learn in future videos when I get into the real Cat H work with her, I also learned that this itching of her side, while we think itching is she had an itch, actually itching, especially if there's a pattern of when and how they do it, and it's in conjunction with other stress behaviors like the tail and the obsessive licking of the barrel here. The itching of her side is another indicator of stress and anxiety. So a lot of behaviors that we don't typically put a lot of meaning or value on can be telling us a lot about how our horse is feeling inside. And in the next episodes, you're going to get to see a lot more about this and understand it at a much deeper level. Here we have even biting going on. So sometimes it was licking, sometimes it was nudging, sometimes it was biting. But I wanted to include a good bit of this footage to show you that this would go on for a long time. And one key indicator of whether a behavior is stress or play is if it's done rather obsessively. And it's not an engagement with any other horses. She's doing this in isolation. She's just trying to comfort herself and to cope. And it's completely displaced behavior. This is another quick clip showing some displaced behavior. I was outside the paddock here, but Tempo went, and again, you might think she's wanting to play with that ball. She's not really interested in playing with that ball. You can see she just came over and needed to busy herself. She needed to, if you've ever been anxious, you kind of want to get that energy, that feeling out of you and put it onto something else. And that's the best way I know how to describe some of what she's going through here. And so she moved the ball. Now here, often it was interesting. Puck would sometimes come to her and almost be like, let me help you. I sense how you're feeling and let me join you. And Tempo would take her up on it and get that moment of connection and just sort of sympathy, maybe empathy. You can see Tempo, though, still looking at me, still not sure what I'm doing. Again, wanted to show you what the other two horses, just kind of minding their own business, not looking at me, relaxed, and then Tempo's body posture, much different. And even though she's facing away from me here, she is still watching me carefully with her eyes. And then she goes to, kind of busying herself again. There's nothing to eat over there, maybe some dry clumps of grass. She's just trying to find something to do to take her mind off how she's feeling inside, which is anxious. So the beginning of my journey with constructional approach training was all about establishing the baseline for Tempo's emotional thresholds in relation to me, and also identifying what some of her typical stress behaviors were. When we get into episode 5, we're going to actually dig into the nuts and bolts of Cat H and what that process looked like when we really started going with it.